On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, don't fear, Nick Caserio is here. How can the Houston Texans save their season by saving money?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers. We are your Texans credentialed media members and
credentialed
media members. I'm John Hickman. That's Brian Big Sarge Barfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and your first listen going into the weekend. Let's have fun. The rodeos in Houston. Get out there, enjoy yourselves, but also make sure that you are enjoying the Locked On Texan podcast. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. On today's show, we'll be diving into mocktails. That's right. We get a little drunk and buzzed on Texans mock drafts. And I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to interact with the fans because you guys did a great job of sending us some. So why not get back to you going into the weekend? The expectations for CJ Stroud very high, not only from general manager Nick Caserio, but also doubling down DeMeco Ryans. And so Sarge and I will dive into our expectations for CJ Stroud. And I think also just talk about why it is important to have those high expectations for a quarterback of CJ standard. But don't fear, Nick Caserio is here. Sarge, Nick Caserio talked about how it's going to be they have multiple ways to create extra cap space for the Houston Texans, and I do believe they need to do that in order to help save their season that's coming up. They got to invest on the offensive side of the ball. Sarge, welcome to today's show.
John Hickman, greetings and salutations from credential media member for the Houston Texans. Oh, and the Houston Rockets.
Let's get back to the Houston Texans, and let's talk about you was out there in Indianapolis. You had an opportunity to speak with Nick Caserio, but one of the big takeaways, and this is a talking point in the city of Houston, is how will the Houston Texans create cap space, get money in the building so they can get their money out and upgrade this roster? This is what Nick Caserio had to say.
Yeah, there's always different ways you can do it. I mean, you can release players, you can restructure players, you can sign extensions. So we'll entertain all and everything. So we're not going to be fixated on one particular thing. But you want to be strategic, you want to be smart about how you do it. So try to keep as number of good players as you can. Where's the opportunity there on a margin, and just try to make good, smart decisions.
That was Nick Caserio talking about creating cap space for the Houston Texans and what the challenges will be. Sarge, from your point of view, what are your thoughts on that?
Man, I had an opportunity to speak with Nick Caserio right before myself and the other beat writers for the Houston Texans had an opportunity to speak with Nick Caserio before he went to the podium. And the very first question I asked him was, how would he be able to manipulate some of the numbers, and how would he be able to create the cap space needed in order to be able to operate as far as to be players, in free agency. And he says that we're going to have the flexibility because we know that last season, John, they were very, very big players in the free agency market as far as being able to pay players to, as far as being able to acquire some big name talent like Danielle Hunter and Joe Mixon and Azeez Al-Shaair, Denico Autry, to be able to bring those type of players in because they had the amount of cap space that they could use that to do that. And now, John, we've used the phrase cash strapped. And what I mean by cash strapped, because cash strapped and cap strapped, it almost goes hand in hand, because if you don't have the money in the cap, then you're cash strapped. And so you're going to have to find ways to be able to manipulate some of these contracts as far as giving extensions. I think that one way that they can do it is Danielle Hunter, defensive end, is looking for an extension. And if they're able to extend him and give him the amount of money that he's looking for, then they could also save money this season. I think that by restructuring some other contracts that we've talked about on here before, They can do that. And so the one thing that I do know about Nick Caserio, John, is you can never count him out. You can never count out the fact that he's able to go in and to manipulate the numbers. And the good thing that he has on his side by being able to create that money and find that money is not only does he have an eye for talent, and listen, let me tell you something. Everything doesn't always pan out. He said on multiple occasions that the draft is a crapshoot. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. And so he has a very good eye for talent, and he hits on talent most of the time. But he also has a head coach who can develop that talent. And so if he's not able to create the amount of money needed to be players in the free agency market in the 2025 season, once the 2026 season rolls around and they have to start doing some other things, they will have more money. And I think there may be some better free agents, that will be able to fill some of the holes and the needs that they have to be able to take that to the next step. So, John, he gave me the sense of he knows what he's doing. He knows how to create the space. He knows how to create the flexibility to become players in the free agency market. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think for the Houston Texans, what you have to do is just look at the market right now. Sarge, I don't know how many times within the last couple of days I'm seeing teams say, hey, we're going to let this player go. Seek a trade. And so I think that's interesting. I don't know if the tone right now for a lot of those guys is seek a trade, go see what your worth is, because at this time we're more inclined to let you go. And if that's the case, I also would see, okay, for the Houston Texans, does it make sense to start looking at some of those guys that you really like and say, do we need to have a conversation of pre and post June cuts? Mm-hmm. We could save some more money if we cut some of these guys post June. The risk is top guys that you like, or those mid-tier guys, will they be going? But for the Houston Texans, look at the situation as you got 20 free agents on your own team right now, and you got guys
20 plus.
20 plus.
Yeah.
What is it right now?
I think if I'm not mistaken, Caserio said it's close to 25.
25 guys on a 53-man roster. You got to make that up, right? And some of those guys, of course, they're not going to command, they're not going to command a lot of the money. They're not going to command $10 million, and I get it. But you got guys that, like a Eric Murray. Like, how do you feel about Eric Murray coming back? Like a Derek Barnett, like a Mario Edwards, like a Folu Fadakowski. Those two names alone, you look at the production that the Houston Texans got out of them last year. How does Houston view them? How do they view that IDL unit altogether? Do they believe, like I said, hey, you bring them in, we coach them up, they'll be ready for Sundays. So I think that they're in an interesting situation. I believe that what Nick Caserio will do, because he's shown us to do that before, he's going to take care of in-house first. Yeah, he's going to look at, okay, guys that DeMeco wants back, guys that Nick Caley likes, guys that the coaching staff likes. And then from there, view the market, see how the market looks and what makes sense. Get some guys out of here, right? Who makes sense to, move on from, because you may feel like there's a player out there that makes more sense, or there's a player in the draft that makes more sense. I don't have the answers, but I do believe that the fine line in between creating some of the money that Houston needs to create will come down to pre and post June cuts.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Do you think that some of these guys who are free agents, and I'm talking about for the Texans, some of these guys for the Texans who are free agents who could be serviceable coming back, are they seeking the market value, or will they take quote unquote hometown discount to be able to come back? And I'm going to use a guy like Folu Fadakowski, who never really got an opportunity to show what he could really do, because he, missed a lot of games due to injury. And so if you bring him back, and if he's willing to take another 1 year deal at a discounted rate just to be able to play with this team, because he loves, when we did the exclusive interview with Rod Wright, you could tell how much he loves those guys and how much those guys love him. I spoke one-on-one to Folu Fadakowski, and he said this is the best defensive line unit, coaching staff that he's been around. He loves that unit. He loves the team. you think that you could see players like him, Derek Barnett, Mario's coming back on a 1-year deal, taking a discounted price?
I could see that because I mean I wouldn't classify those guys as franchise defensive linemen.
Yeah.
No shot at them, and especially those two guys. They had a great year for the Houston Texans last year. But I can see the case of other teams may like you, but do you want to leave Houston?
Yeah.
All right, do you want to leave this coaching staff? Do you want to maybe go to a place that may take more of your money in taxes? So that's the case. And I want to add the Houston Texans again can create additional space by extensions, right? As I look at overthecap.com right now, they could create additional space by extending Danielle Hunter. That'll clear up near maybe $14 million. Titus Howard, if they choose to ride with him, $11 million. Nico Collins, $10 million. They have the way to do it. What player do they view as, okay, if we want to extend this guy, we like him for a reason. We want to keep him here for the window. Some of these guys, they may not want to extend because down the line, it makes more sense, to find your replacement right now. I am very curious to see how Nick Caserio goes about this because he does have his hands full, and this will probably be one of his biggest challenges since coming to Houston, probably since his first year when he didn't have a first or second round pick.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we got to talk about the expectations for CJ Stroud from DeMeco, from Nick Caserio, and from Sarge and John. So don't go nowhere. We got more Locked On Texans. However, guys, this is the perfect opportunity to let you in on the biggest kept secret. It ain't even a secret no more. FanDuel is hooking y'all up. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is getting started. There's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. FanDuel is easy to use. The app is easy to navigate. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's $150 if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Sarge, there were a lot of encouraging things that Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans said the past couple of days. One thing that I love, head coach DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio was asked about their relationship, and he said, "I'll go to war with this guy." Swarm mentality on the field and in the front office. And he also touched on that, hey, Cole Popovich was promoted because the players thought highly of him. You guys heard that first where here on the Locked On Texans podcast. He also continued with by saying some of the offensive coordinators that we talked about had reference code as somebody that they would want to potentially consider. And so he was a guy that it seemed like they didn't want to lose. And that's a good thing for a coach that is stepping into a position that really needs a makeover. Now, the expectations for CJ Stroud in year 3. Nick Caserio talked about it. DeMeco Ryans talked about it. Pat McAfee asked Nick Caserio if they wanted to trade quarterbacks, and I thought that was funny because hell no. But let's hear what Nick Caserio had to say.
Yeah, CJ's a good player. He has to continue to improve. There's things that he's going to work on in the offseason, but the offseason is an opportunity for every player to improve their individual performance and get themselves ready for the season in front of them. So CJ's done a lot of great things on a yearly basis. His first year, he did a lot of really good things last year as well. I think sometimes that kind of gets lost in the shuffle there a little bit. So, all right, what happened last season? What can we learn from it as a team? What can he learn from it individually? Okay, in the offseason, here are the things that I'm going to focus on to try to make myself a better football player. You get better at football by working, practicing, playing football. So, that's your job and responsibility, and that's what we ask of all of our players. So I think CJ's motivated this offseason to have a good offseason, prepare himself to try to be the best player he can be, once the season starts.
No more all white parties, Sarge. That's what I heard. But
Yeah.
you heard that from Nick Caserio. You also heard DeMeco Ryans. If you didn't hear, rather, DeMeco Ryans did say CJ Stroud has to take a step back and really dive into the offseason. That's where the season is won. CJ is going to be much better and have a much better offseason. The emphasis is CJ, we're going to do everything we need to make sure that you're set up, but you need to do what you need to do, Sarge.
John, give me 1 second.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that I double checked and I seen this. Okay. So yes, I normally don't, and then I've said this on multiple occasions. I normally don't evaluate a quarterback till after year 3. CJ Stroud had a wonderful, amazing, immaculate, a record-setting rookie year. And then he went into the offseason. John, he was 21, going on 22 years old, if I'm not mistaken.
He was also going on podcast tours.
But listen to what I'm saying, though, John. He was a rookie who had success immediately. We live in a social media era. We live in a social media age. We don't live in a newspaper age anymore. We don't live in a magazine age anymore. We don't live in just the radio and the television. And so we live in a social media era to whereas CJ's name was hot. CJ helped take a franchise who had been in the dust, in the dirt, and was on the mist of sinking and brought them back in his first season. Now, he didn't do it all by himself, but he was one of the main reasons why they did it. I mean, 3 years prior, we watched this franchise just, go to hell in a handbasket. So, and excuse my language, but it was, I was there. I watched. I was around when they had three seasons of a combined 11 wins. And in the first season, CJ, exceeded that total and that expectation, all while being 21 years old. So going into the offseason and everything that he did in the offseason, do I think that it was a little bit too much? Some would say that, but some would also say, hey, man, here's a young man who is the face of the franchise, who has gotten all these accolades, who everybody is crowning as the next one, and he just made some mistakes. He may have done a little bit too much on the CJ Stroud media tour coming into the second year. But the one thing that I really like about CJ, and I think the last question that CJ Stroud was asked during his exit interview at NRG Stadium was by me, and I asked him, are you starting to feel the weight of being the franchise quarterback? And he just started laughing. He's like, man, I didn't know. It's harder than what I thought it would be. And so last offseason, I seen CJ every time you turned around, you seen CJ, doing something on a podcast with Micah Parsons on, going over to, I think they went to Japan, if I'm not mistaken, and did a tour over there. He was there doing the NFL draft, and he was just enjoying the fruits of his labor. But his second season, I think that he realized, it wasn't so much of just the off season, but it was just his second season in the NFL. Some of the defenses, got adjusted to some of the things that Bobby Slowick was doing on the offensive side of the ball, and some of the things that CJ was doing as well. And so I don't think that I'm not going to blame last offseason on the lack of production going into the second season. That's not everything. I'm not blaming all of that on CJ and what he did in the summer. But what I will say is this: talking to CJ in the locker room, talking to him throughout the year, you could see the maturity and the growth of him, and you could see he started to realize, I am truly the face of this franchise. There's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of weight on me, but this is something that I'm used to. He told me, Sarge, I've been the man of my house since I was 14 years old. He said, so this is nothing new. This is just something I have to get adjusted to. So yes, last offseason, he lived his life as a 21-year-old with money, fame, fortune, face of the franchise, NFL player, NFL offensive rookie of the year. But that second season, he started to realize, and now we haven't seen him as much. I think, if I'm not mistaken, John, he declined an invitation to the
Pro Bowl. Yeah, and that's when it started for me.
Yeah, and so, and he also has to get healthy. So what I think you're going to see in year 3 from CJ Stroud is a totally different CJ Stroud, who's going to take the good from his rookie season, take the adversity from his second season, mix that all in together, and I could see them getting if they get the right type of free agents and make the right types of draft picks, I could see them potentially going to the AFC Championship. They have that type of team that can make it there. Now, before you all get into the YouTube comments, I'm not saying, hey, they're going to the AFC Championship right now. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I believe that with CJ Stroud getting another year up under his belt, he's going to have a better outlook, and he also gets a different offense. He also gets a different offense in his, a different offensive play caller in his ear, and he also gets more control over his offense. And the last thing I'm gonna say, John, is this: I asked DeMeco Ryans before he went to the podium at the NFL Combine, has Nick Caserio and CJ, have they been in communication? Have they talked since he got hired? And he said, hey man, one of the requirements of him getting the job is he had to talk to CJ, and that makes me that reassures me that they're going to say, CJ, this is you do what you do.
I want to say this, man. I believe that we should be hard on CJ. Yes, we should absolutely be hard on CJ. The last off season, that's what you really want to see. You want to see him go out and do all of those things, and you want to see him make that tour. Because you know why you want to see it? You don't want to see it out of the system. Get it out of the system, right? Get it out young. This is where I'm going to be critical of CJ because he's a great quarterback. If this was Tim Boyle or this was Savage, I wouldn't really have these problems because we'll be looking at, okay, Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders or Jackson Dart. But what I'm going to be critical of CJ is I'm not going to put the weight that Bobby Slowick had on his team all on him, but I'm also not going to allow for us to get away from critiquing some of the things that he failed to do as a quarterback. And for me, one of the things that I really had a problem with from CJ as we got to the second half of that season was not getting that ball out when the ball needed to come out, and always looking for, not always, but consistently looking for the deep shot when it wasn't there. In year 3, working with a Nick Caserio who's been around Matthew Stafford, who's been around Tom Brady, we keep saying it over and over again. I want to see more of not more of the quarterback techniques, but I want to see more of the mental game from CJ Stroud blossom. And that's knowing right now this defense is giving me this, showing me this. And one thing that I love about the potential of Nick Caserio, having multiple plays for a quarterback to have, depending on what the defense is showing, I want to see that mental exercise of CJ at the line of scrimmage, breaking out of their huddle, which hopefully they get out that huddle faster than what they did last year, and knowing what to call, whether or not he needs to audible check or not, because that'll give him, I think, much more opportunities to really go at defenses. And so my expectation for CJ Stroud, number one for this offseason, get healthy, right? Yeah. Just get healthy. I think he's doing that. We haven't necessarily heard much from him or about him. So in my eyes, that's a good thing. He's not in the news, and he's definitely not in the news for anything negative. But also take that time to reflect on yourself. And while I'm positive in CJ, he's gonna do that. He's probably done that every week during the regular season. But just understanding that year 3 is going to command a lot from him. And I think physically, we're not going to be worried about that. Technical, we'll see him clean up on some things because technique-wise, we saw him kind of take a step back. I don't know if that was because of his quarterback's coach. I think the same guy, Quincy Avery, not sure. But from a mental standpoint, I want to see the difference in between year 1 and 2 and year 3. And I'm also going to show him grace in that area because now he has a new OC. But that's what I want to see, the expectation. Once you get a mental quarterback that can beat you like that, then the city of Houston and the fans should be saying, hey, we should be competing for a Super Bowl.
Well, John, let me ask you a question. Earlier this week, we talked about protecting CJ Stroud. Right. How much of that mentality do you think went into the fact that he did get sacked so many times?
A lot.
So many times.
Passer calls.
Huh?
He didn't get no rough passer calls. They just put out, he got hit over 100 times. He didn't get no foul penalties called on him. That's insane, NFL.
And let me tell you something. I can name you a play right now. I think it was the end of the half against the. I think it was the end of the half in week 16 against the Kansas City Chiefs, where he threw the ball and they waylaid him, and
Yeah.
it was not a roughing the passer call, but they gave him. But real quickly, John, the question that I want to ask you though is, we seen something from CJ that I hadn't seen from him not during his rookie year, and that was happy feet. He started to get a lot of happy feet in that pocket, and he started to get choppy. And I knew at that point, hey, something isn't right, because that's how David Mills used to be in the pocket. David Mills used to be in the pocket with his feet choppy like that, and then that's when the throws looked terrible, and that's when the throws looked horrible. So I don't know, when we talk about a mental mindset, let me say it like this. I think that he started to see ghosts. I think that he started to hear ghosts, and it didn't correct itself until towards the end of the season, and you could finally see him starting to settle down. But in the middle of the season, it was too much of chopping, and he was excuse me, because he had been hit so much.
Let me answer that question. When we come back, we got more Locked On Texas and mocktails. Y'all pour up. It's time to get a little bit petty and buzz. How about that? Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Sarge, to answer your question, do I think the pressure got to him and then threw him off a little bit? I think, yeah, a lot of bit. A whole lot of bit. A whole lot of bit. But again, first overall pick, he's a guy that I hold to a gold standard for a quarterback, young quarterback. If you ask the guys next year, if we see Jaden Daniels take a step back, they're going to say, hey, listen, we're not going to just baby him because we know what you can do. And that's not what we're doing here on the show. But there were some things that I felt like that was more so on CJ. And processing was where I became critical of CJ down the stretch of last season.
And John, look, the 12 interceptions that he threw, if you look at the 12 interceptions, I think he had 20 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. And out of those 12, I can honestly say 9 of those were his fault. Listen, the Detroit game, all CJ's fault. All on CJ.
What's the game where Tank Dell was wide open and he just floated it? That was something where I was just, come on, CJ, you got to be better there.
Yeah, but playing against the New York Jets, a team that was on a 5-game losing streak, and CJ didn't look good. Against the Packers, he only had 86 yards passing. Yeah. And so don't get me wrong, I don't want the viewers and the listeners to think that I'm just over here caping for CJ. CJ will be the first one to tell you. Like I said, I've talked to CJ on numerous occasions, and he'll tell you, hey man, look, I played bad. He's come to the podium and said, I've played bad. So some of these things, yes, was on CJ. Some of these turnovers were on CJ's. Some of those 3 and outs, some of those inefficiency. We can't blame it all on Bobby. We can't blame it all on the line. We can't blame it all on Ben McDaniels and the route concepts. Some of that was on CJ, and he took responsibility for that. And I think that over this offseason, he's going to take it personal.
Yeah, he should. He should. Let's dive into the mock drafts from our listeners and viewers and all of our friends out there. My man Larry Payton at Ducey Pay 75. Sarge, you may like this one. You may like this one. Okay. Luther Burden III slid down to 25 in this mock draft. So this is how it went. Luther Burden at 25, Colston Loveland at 58, Travion Henderson, running back, Ohio State at 89, Jake Majors, center at 127, and Ollie Gordon at 167. 2 running backs.
No, I'm listening to you.
Like 2 running backs. I don't know. That's when you need a defensive line, like we just talked about, losing out on Foley and Mario Edwards. You need a D lineman. Not addressing the guard. I don't know if your thought behind this was moving Jake Majors over the guard or what. No safety. Larry, this ain't it, man. I'm sorry, brother.
What?
That wasn't it, man.
Because of his pick at number 25.
Yeah, I don't see Luther Burden sliding to 25.
Why not?
I don't see it. between Luther and DeMeco, I do see them being one of those receivers that could fall, but I don't think Luther will fall down to 25. But not addressing the guard position, not addressing D tackle, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. Now, one of the things that I saw with all of these mock drafts, people are starting to talk themselves into two things, Sarge.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the first one is? I've been knowing
wide receiver at number 25.
Wide receiver at number 25. But at 25, Matthew Golden at 25. I'm seeing a lot of these mock drafts. My man.
Is that
Patton,
because the Mecca's not going to be there?
I'm not sure. That's just who they went with. My man Patton drafted Matthew Golden. My man Dylan Seelick drafted Matthew Golden at 25. Let's see. We got my man X Razor drafted Matthew Golden at 25. I'm seeing a lot of Matthew Golden at 25. But you want to know what another theme is?
What's that?
And this is where I've been knowing you long enough to know that you probably hit me with I told you so.
Well, I was going to do that with the wide receivers.
It's a lot of trading back.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, but John, that's what I told you about with the wide receivers too. I'm going wide receiver first because look, I know what I have on defense. I need to try to outscore my opponent. I know my defense can hold on the other side. They were top 5 defense, top 6 defense in the league. Hey, I know what my defense can do. I need a wide receiver too, or somebody that can fill that position, that's serviceable and formidable to be able to get us to where we need to go until maybe going into 2026 and maybe, free agency, but that rookie may be able to pan out. Yeah. And I say, if you have the opportunity to get a day one starter at 25, you take them. If not, you move back and then you collect draft picks.
Now, here are some very interesting mock drafts. And this one I like a lot, actually. Okay. My man Joe Lee at Follow the Dreads. DeMeco at 25.
Okay.
D tackle Deion Walker at 58.
From where?
Kentucky.
Okay.
That solves a problem. You got 2 problems solved for Houston.
Right.
3rd round at 89. This is where, again, I said the other day, if Houston feels strongly enough about a running back, you go take him. DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. 127, Luke Lakey, tight end out of Iowa. 167, Jimmy Horn Jr., wide receiver, Colorado.
John, hold on real quickly. I'm glad you said that because I have been waiting to talk about that. And I know that it may have to be on the next episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, but I really, really, really like Jimmy Horn. And if he's available in those later rounds, you take him. I watched a lot of Colorado football over the last 2 years, John. I really like that kid.
Jimmy could do some things, and you look at maybe supplementing a player for a player because Tank is out. Maybe you look at Jimmy.
Yes.
Here's another one: Colson Loveland at 25. I'm not with that one. Donovan Jackson at 58. If he's there, that's a good pick.
Yeah.
D tackle Alfred Collins at 89. So the first 3 picks. This is from my man Jarvis 417. Collins is from Texas.
So let me tell you something.
The first 3 picks, my man Jarvis, no receivers.
I'm going to be honest with you, John. As long as they go and find some players early on from the SEC and the Big Ten, I'm cool with that. Because it's plain to see, John, that I'll put it like this. If you look at the team that they have, the players who are making things happen come from where? The SEC and the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Go get them.
This one is probably my favorite one. Rodney Bryce.
They go along 25.
No, Emeka Buke at 25.
Okay.
My man Joan, I cannot pronounce his last name, but forgive me. He's an offensive tackle from Arizona, but he's played some right guard. And I like that a lot because I just looked at the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. Them big boys played a huge factor into why they won a Super Bowl. And you got a guy that's big enough to block for CJ Stroud, whether it's at tackle or guard. Dylan Sampson, running back, Tennessee. Terrence Ferguson, tight end, Oregon. JJ Pegues, D tackle, Ole Miss. Jackson Hawes, tight end, Georgia Tech. I like that one.
I like that one as well. And before we get out of here, John, the Houston Texans, and like I said, we can talk about this on the next episode of the Locked On Texas podcast. Ain't the Houston Texans kind of getting a rookie offensive lineman, a good rookie offensive lineman back next year in Ladarius Henderson, who has blocked at Arizona State for Jaden Daniels and then won a national championship at the University of Michigan? Remember, he was out the whole season with an injury. They get him back next year.
Houston has some guys on this roster, some young guys that, if coaching is right, they may be able to solve a lot of their own problems if they just get in their room early and often and just say, hey, we're going to fix these guys up.
DYI, John. They can DYI.
They can get it together at home, man. We got to go to the draft. They still need to go to the draft, though. Let me not say that. But thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Over the weekend, NFL Combine will be taking place. So when we come back, we'll have a better idea of players, breaking down all of their T-shirt drills, and why some of them may not even matter at all. But follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12, and 3 favors before we go into the weekend. Like, comment, and subscribe for your boy.
And make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Sarge Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gents, and Battle Red Nations all across the world, peace.